Hey, folks, welcome back to the Pulse. My name is Matt. This is Crypto Heartbeat. It is Stephen Friday. It's 11 o'clock Central Texas time. And I'm so glad to be back with you today. Boy, we just got a really good one. Episode 59. I've titled this one, The Truth is a Person. And, folks, it's amazing. The first time I met Steve Staggs, I literally shook his hand. The Lord said, "Hey, listen to this guy." I'm like, "Is he an angel?" And amazing, like 18 months later, this is a clip from episode 37. This is the episode before Steve passed. And I almost feel like it was amazing what happened. And, I feel like at that time I kind of graduated um, in a strange sort of way. They passed something on to me. But I had an experience yesterday with my buddy ZZ Tesco, and I've asked him to come on at the end. He's my guest. He's my guest today. But ZZ Tesco and I had basically an amazing experience through pain yesterday. That just the Lord Jesus gave us an amazing. It's like we leveled up, like we got the next belt, if you will. And I'm gonna have him come on, and we're gonna chat about that as well in the context of what Steve has to say here. But I just want to acknowledge the fact that Steve was a professional baseball player, and in fact, my buddy ZZ Tesco was so nice. He got me the Steve Staggs baseball card. So there we go. And he got this for me in a frame. I always wanted a Steve baseball card, and ZZ Tesco got that for me. It's just this constant reminder of the impact that Steve had on my life by basically telling me a very simple thing. Are you interested in what Jesus has to say? I'm like, yeah, I am. Well, he's alive and he speaks. Why don't you ask him yourself? And that's been the journey, amazing journey that I've been on. But I want to share with you at the end of this the amazing thing that happened yesterday for us, and just revelation. But it comes through pain, and the challenges of that is so many are going through so many things. And I'm just going to say hello to the chat because I know there's some folks that are challenged and struggling. Sam Kemp's here. I'm ready for some Steve. But Mike, actually, I think in this clip, Steve talks about you because right before he passed, he had a really amazing conversation with you. And, you're certainly on my heart. I wrestle with Satan all night long, but I've got Jesus. That's right. And the cool thing about it is, there's a reason that Satan or sin is crouching at the door, is that we give it permission. Right. And the amazing thing that I had that very same experience, Mike, in obviously different circumstances. But literally I found myself saying, "Hey, Jesus, you're the only one that has authority to speak to me. Satan, you have no standing here." And it's been the go-to, and it works. And it's just amazing to understand the structure of how things work. Um, it's amazing. So we'll talk about that. Sam Kemp says there's no match for Jesus. That's the truth. Dan sends his regrets working. Absolutely. Well, Dan, we'll catch you on the replay. Looking forward to Stephen, Matt, and Jesus and ZZ Tesco today. So let's jump right into it. This is a good one, as they all are. The gift that keeps on giving, and that is the wisdom of our friend Steve Stagg. So here we go. Over again. But the questions that I had at the very beginning, I'm sure are the questions that just like my son has.
Yeah.
Hey, how do I know that it's him and all that? And so here's the interesting thing. So I wrestled with this when I first met you, right? You're like, well, just listen to him. And I'm like, well, how do I know it's him? Right. Which is, I think, the common question like most
Yeah.
people ask. I mean, I remember talking to Cadium and he's like, how do you know it's him? And I'm like, and of course, he gives you these analogies. Here's the thing that's interesting, Steve. And I think that this may be helpful to other people who might be wanting to try this on for size.
Mhm.
And tell me, like, help me explain this. When I went to him, he gives me personally, and I think that this is custom designed for us, and it may be different for different people. But he gave me a picture first and then gave me words. That's how it worked this time for me.
Yeah.
I'm not saying he's not going to be audible and go, and speak from the mountaintop, but it's been pretty consistent that there's always been and maybe that's just how he works with me and the temperament and all this to say, I know you understand these analogies, but I'm going to give you a word picture that has a lot of things packed into it, and I'm going to give you a statement as well. And the fact that it's really interesting for me, you would say, "Hey, you can have this conversation at all times. You could have it right now." I feel like it's been really helpful to not have a lot of noise around me
Yeah.
when these things have happened, right? Shower, strangely, you know, middle of the night, no distractions, early morning. What do I know that there's probably this scenario, but like, hey, you can talk to me anytime. I'm not limited to these, hours of operation. But what should someone expect? Because I almost feel like you can't say, well, this is how he does it, and he's going to do the same thing for me as he does for you. No, it seems like it's custom made for you, and it could take on a lot of different, at different times, be different approaches. How do you explain that? Because I think a lot of people, I think it's hard to imagine. Really, like my son is saying, Steve, does Jesus really speak to you? How does he do that?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think a lot of people have that question.
Yeah, they do. I mean, I had it. We all do. And but what I would offer is part of that is because we are approaching it from a position of full experience now. I mean, your son is not listening to this stream. There probably aren't many 10 or 12-year-olds
Right.
listening to this stream, let alone 2 or 3-year-olds, let
Right.
alone 6-month-olds. You see where I'm going with
Yeah.
that?
Yeah.
We
Totally.
we are fully grown adults who have our faculties trained over for seeing and hearing and speaking over many, many years, sometimes decades and decades. Me and Katie have been doing this for, about 7 decades. We're pretty well schooled in how to see, how to hear, how to speak. And so we inject that mature experience into our beginning point with Jesus. All right. So, what are we doing? We are injecting into a brand new experience the full maturity of a capability developed over decades. And the implication of that is that we want it to happen exactly the same way at that same level.
Yep.
So we use words like audible. We look with astonishment. You mean Jesus actually talks to you?
Right.
Oh, is it even possible? Does God? God doesn't talk to you. Look at this wacko. He thinks God talks to him.
Right.
All those various things. So, okay. So the first thing is that isn't how it works.
Mm.
Okay. Once again, you don't bring the baby home from the hospital and say, okay, here's the encyclopedia. Read me the first 4 chapters and let's see what your comprehensive skills are. No, we don't do that. We start from a very basic point with the idea of elevating the child from where their beginning point is of having no experience or skill set developed, even though the capability is there, to eventually bringing them along to where they can have a mature means of not only speaking, seeing, and hearing, but also comprehending the very things they speak, hear, and say. Okay. It's time.
Yeah.
So, first of all, let's be reasonable about this a little bit. Accept your starting point.
Yeah.
This is one of the prophets. I can't remember his name right off the bat. Is Jehovah said to him, "Do not despise the day of small beginnings."
Ah, yes.
See, the kingdom of God is like a man sowing seed. When that seed is sown, it doesn't show up as the full mature fruit the next 15 minutes.
Yeah.
It has to go through a process that is prescribed and defined within the construct of my kingdom. Accept that. What happens when you try to rush the seed in its growth? You don't get the produce. You want the produce? Relax a little bit. And Jesus says certain things like this. If you want to enter my kingdom, you have to enter as a little child. Well, that word is infant. You got to enter as an infant. So there is a transferring of from obligation to hear to understanding we have the capability of hearing, but then transferring the responsibility to the one who knows how to hear and speak and see to train us properly in the proper time. I mean, think about this, Matt. We met a year ago last September.
Uh-huh.
We're not a full 18 months into this thing. Tell me the amount of growth that you have had in that 18 months in this area.
Yeah. It's just It's like nitrous oxide has been injected into the cylinders.
right?
Yeah.
And what's happening, because we're not rushing it, you're doing your part. Nobody has a chance, nobody has authority to speak to me but Jesus alone.
Yep.
Yeah, I know you're going to be running off the mouth, but you have no standing here. So the moment I recognize it's you, it's going to be over. Have you had that experience
Oh yeah.
of
Oh,
saying
yeah.
it's over? What happened when you said it's done?
It was gone.
It was was that some theoretical thing?
No, it like fleed from me.
Yes, exactly what James 4:7 says. And it will flee from you seeking safety. Why? Because you're beginning to enter the realm of intolerable risk. They cannot tolerate, the powers of darkness cannot tolerate a single man, a single woman venturing into the forbidden area of learning to listen to Jesus. So I'm going to say it again. Your starting point is simply saying, Jesus, would you teach me how to hear your voice and how to live with you every day, in every moment, in everything that I do? Will you simply teach me how to hear your voice and to live with you? Once you do that, and it's the real deal, then my input is relax. It's not a formula.
Right.
It is a relationship. Just like you didn't incorporate a formula for those of you who brought a baby home from the hospital. You didn't sit there with a little flow chart and say, okay, we start here, then if we do this and we go here, you didn't do that.
No.
It's the same kind of thing. So that might be a little lengthy answer, but that kind of brings a lot of the elements together. Hey, just be satisfied with being an infant in the kingdom and let the one who knows how to do this teach you how to do it right.
Yeah. Well, and you've said this many times and you've given many examples of this is, are you interested?
Yeah.
There's that basic thing. And I think that that's so why I've always said that this is the access is refreshing, right? You've made Jesus more accessible to me.
Mm.
Well, isn't that kind of what he's like, have them come to me?
Yeah.
Right. And you think about this idea of like, I always remember your story about being 6 years old and the pastor saying, hey, I want to introduce you to Jesus. They're like, where's he at?
Yeah,
I
I'm
love
in.
that so much. Right. But it's the same kind of thing. It's like, okay, yeah, I'm interested in knowing. And I think the thing here for me too, because I came to process this stuff as an adult, right? I was 28 years old when I really was like, hey, like, you're going to have to either fish or cut bait here, dude. Like, you're going to be real or you're not.
Yes.
I need you to be real. That'd be really, really nice. But it's, that's the incredible part about all this. It's hard to imagine, but here we are coming into an interesting time, Steve. Like when I grew up in, 70s, 80s, right? That was kind of my 70s, 80s, 90s, if you will. Um, there was kind of, you know, a lot of things weren't exposed,
Yeah.
right? We didn't have a 24-hour news cycle. The things that we were kind of worried about were kind of local. Really, really only looked at network television. Video games kind of started, but it was Pong.
Yeah.
We played in the woods a lot. It was simpler times, and here we are. And I think that as we have access to more of this, and, look at the World Economic Forum, right? Maybe we can transition to like today's stuff. The World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab and his band of elites are meeting, and their number one concern is misinformation and disinformation. And what's amazing is you said and we talked about this many times, that once you see it, you can't unsee it.
Yeah.
And all you have to do is listen to it and it will reveal itself.
Yes.
Okay. And, I'm like, well, how does that work? Now I understand how that works.
Yeah.
And so what do? Their number one priority is to keep you from seeing the truth. Their number one priority is they're saying this misinformation, disinformation, which is literally, in my opinion, we don't want you to actually know what's really going on. So our agenda is one of censorship.
Yeah.
We want to control the narrative. And you think about this. What is freedom? What is pure light, if not probable truth?
Yes.
And and I think about guys like I admire Tucker Carlson because he's like, well, why can't we just ask any question? Why can't we probe it to the very, very depths of it? Why aren't we asking these questions? Why is anything off limits? And what's really neat about that is that's actually reflective of Jesus. Like, he's okay. You can ask him anything.
Yeah.
And I think that that's the thing that's really interesting about this is it's shifted from requests to questions. And I think there's something really big about that. But when you see, and I'm not just trying to say that, Klaus Schwab is the devil. I'm saying there is a group of people who have gone their own way. And when you think about the simplicity of this is you said, do you want to do it on your own or you want to do it with the guy who made it all? right? And you think about that. Well, that's kind of the thing that he preserved. You can go your own way. But it also seems, Steve, like there are the spirits of darkness that don't have authority will try to get your authority and try to essentially convince you and potentially offer you things, just like when Satan tempted Jesus and said, "Hey, you can have all of this." He's like, "Nope." He resisted that, right? That temptation of no, man does not live on bread alone. But all of the promises that were given, it seems like Jesus modeling that behavior to say no. And now I understand like why is the first commandment the first commandment? It makes 100% why it's number one. You
Yeah.
should have no gods before me. Why? Because that's what you're going to find in this world.
Yeah.
That there are so many things that are going to try to be gods before me. And what do we see?
Yeah.
We see people across the world who, in a way, I was my own god. It could be a number of things. I could say it's money. I could say it's relationships. I could say it's, whatever, insert drugs, insert whatever. But then there's also the spiritual side of things that you realize that, hold on, the whole idea of this is to make you ineffective and not be in the game. But to think that there are those who have aligned themselves with these forces and have been given power and have participated in that scarcity model and in that left-hand side of the slide and in that scarcity thing and have participated with it. And and I think a lot of times they don't realize or recognize that they are agents of that darkness. So I feel like the implications of all this, when I reflect on the 80s and 90s, and now I look at today, the timing of this is there's a role that we play. And the more and more I think about the money falling onto the plate, it's not about the money at all.
No.
It's not about the money at all. And that actually there are so many elements that are kingdom focused. So for example, if I said the kingdom is a place of generosity and abundance, and let's say those things are true. And in the left-hand side or the upside down world is one of scarcity and enslavement. It's one of control and power. It's not one of freedom, and it's not one of rest, and it's not one of peace, and it's not one of abundance. And if you think about this, very binary, that this is a choice that we make of who we will follow. And now it makes sense to me. Well, we could make a decision and things change. This is like huge, huge implications of that. And I think about, well, what's our role? 2 years ago when I started this channel, I'm like, I was not doing this before, Steve. Like this
Yeah.
is new.
Yeah.
And I think about it and I'm like, well, there's 10,000 people subscribed. And okay, that's a decent amount of people. There's probably, there's only 15 on this one particular stream. But everyone I talked to, I brought a guy on DIY investing. This kid is 26 years old. He was in juvenile detention. He, was snatched out of the fire. And he's like, yeah. And I didn't talk to him about anything related to faith or anything. He's like, yep, I prayed to Jesus and I didn't really believe in him, but I got into psychedelics and I saw the demonic. I came face to face with the demonic and I literally ran the other way and I ran to Jesus. And it's like, and I'm like, this kid's 26 years old. We're on a crypto channel and we're talking like, why is this all going to this? And what I found is every time we ask those questions and we're not just like focused on the money, and that's what happens in these interviews. It's like, oh yeah, hey, what are you doing? How's this work for you? And then next thing you know, it's like, no, there's a purpose in all this. And
Yeah.
I see that he's using the money to empower and lift up his man, right? And it's like preparing for this time.
Yeah.
But the implications aren't just, oh, you're going to be rich. No. The richness is not financial. The richness is what beyond you can possibly imagine. And I think about this like, is Jesus know of infinite energy? Does he know of infinite healing? Does he know of infinite existence? Does he know of eternity? Does he know of, provision? Yes, all of the above. Are we living in it? No. Is something amiss? Yes.
Yep.
Well, what does it take? And what is amazing to me is that it resides and rests in a decision that we each make.
Yeah.
Rather than some event that might happen. Oh, Jesus is returning. He'll make it all right. No. What's he doing in you?
Yeah.
Like you actually are a part of his kingdom coming. And partly because I think we're an extension of the Father, just like the Son was.
Yeah.
Right? We're just an extension of him. Anyway, I just went on to like 50 different topics there, but
Well,
yeah.
it's fun though, because you're, if we had a more structured kind of stream, that might have been, going off the rails, but that's not the way this particular conversation goes. It is conversation.
Yeah.
And the way that we're talking together, I know you are having more so, but I have those same conversations with Jesus where I go totally off the rails. and I'm going all over the place. And not one time have I ever experienced him being disinterested in what I had to say, because every single bit of it is connected to the core reality of what is true. I'm beginning to discover what is true. And sometimes that's really clear and I can state it precisely. Sometimes it's foggy and I've got to say about 10,000 words just to try to get it out in the various concepts. Sometimes it's just about being quiet and just thinking about it. And they're all acceptable because this is not a mechanical engagement. It is a relationship between living beings.
Hmm.
And it's very, very fluid. When I first started this whole thing about hearing from God, I wanted to create a flowchart.
Yeah.
I wanted to create a mechanism. In fact, I taught for years. There's certain friends who have been with me way back in the early 80s when I put together these teaching seminars called Hearing from God. And man, that was really great stuff. But I was simply describing what my own experience was, which there wasn't anybody talking that way back then.
Yep.
And I tried to make it a mechanical process or take it to a mechanical process. And once I started going in that direction, Jesus shut it down. That's not where we're going. That's not what this is about. Once you do that, you put it in control of other people and they will, in all good intention, they will pervert it because they don't know how to teach another person how to hear my voice.
Yep.
See, I'm the only one who knows how they're wired. I'm the only one who knows when to inject myself into that situation and speak a little word into their ear in a half a sentence, or like in Mike's case, one compound sentence that, he's going, wow, that's okay. I like that. And out of a compound sentence, just blew this thing up. We get on the phone together, and two pages of notes later, he's going, wow, all out of a compound sentence. Well, I don't know how to do that. But Jesus knows how to do that.
Yeah.
And that, and we've said it many, many times. And by the way, learning how to do this is really essential. In sports, they have a term, and we've talked about it occasionally on here, especially in the early episodes, that you're only as good as your fundamentals. Well, that's what's happening. Your fundamentals are being not only established, but refined. So that oh, wow, it really is true. It's just not a concept that I can say, guys, you've said your piece, we'll see you. Well, wait till you tell them to produce. Wait till this reality that Jesus has got it and you're starting to get it. And the intruder comes in and starts, brandishing all kinds of stuff. And you say, okay, show me what you got. And watch what happens to them. Now, you're not going to tell somebody who just got started day before yesterday to do that. But in a couple of years, you might introduce that concept to them. Okay? Just like what's happening, with what's happening with you. You're actually learning how this works, not from a theoretical or a philosophical standpoint, but hey, man, this is the real deal. That's what we're longing for on the planet, Matt, is the planet. If you're listening to them, if you're listening to the people, they're screaming out, will somebody please just tell me the truth?
Yep.
Will you please just tell me the truth? Well, guess what? This is what the truth looks like. But it doesn't resemble anything of what a person thinks. Because it's not a series of factual statements. It is a person. You want the truth? Go to the guy who's the truth. And we say it every week. You're not going to be disappointed if you're really interested.
Yep.
And you're sharing that today.
Yeah.
I mean, what would have taken you to come up with the story that you talked about?
Well, you can't.
You can't.
No.
It's like, I don't have the horsepower to make that stuff up.
The truth is a person. Will you please just tell me the truth? What's amazing is I go through and review these things, and they're so packed with so many things, and it's I want to like, we put, I think 20, almost 25 minutes of Steve up. And what's hard about it is there's so many things packed into like these statements. I wrote some notes while we are listening there, and it's like I want to listen to the whole thing, right? And I think about it, you know, these things are transformative concepts, and they just absolutely blow my mind. The first one I wrote down was intolerable risk, and I'm just blown away, but also just reminded that, you know, when we first started all this, he said, Matt, we've forgotten who we are. We've forgotten who we are. And of course, you can go back into those from the first couple, and it's like, well, who does he say we are? And I think it's pretty common for people that have been in church to say, well, yeah, through Jesus, we're sons, right? We've been adopted, we've been grafted in. I'm the vine, you're the branches. Without me, you can do nothing. And we kind of go, yeah, that's great. But what's amazing is, what does it mean if you are created in the image of God? All of this stuff that's around us. I'm going to show you something, and I'm going to bring Ray in, and we're going to talk about this. ZZ Tesco. I want to show you something, because here we are talking about, life, and how we hear from Jesus, and here's this, process, right? And he used this story of living things, right? Bringing a baby home, approaching like an infant. And he's like, hey, you can relax, man. Like, listening, he will teach you how to do this. But it's so common that we want the answer. And I wrote this down. It goes from requests to questions. Rather than saying, Jesus, give me these things, or I'm praying for this outcome. I want this person to be healed. I don't blame you. I want that person to be healed too. I need these things. And this big shift for me, and the big aha for me, is it goes from from requests to questions. How do you see this? Jesus was in the Garden of Gethsemane, and it says he was a stone's throw away from the disciples. And this is right. He knew he was going to the cross, right? And he literally is praying, and he says to the Father, if there's any way we can do this differently, please remove this cup from me, which is a request, right? Even Jesus himself asking the Father to remove this cup from him. And we don't know what the Father said to him, but it says that he was changed. And it was a picture of what prayer is. It's this understanding of a perspective that is not your own. And likely, Steve said, when we talked about that on one of the episodes, he said, maybe the conversation went a little bit like this. Remember, how are we going to accomplish all that was written, right? Remember what we decided to do in this creation. And it says he was changed. And think about this from a prayer perspective. If you go from requests, which he's okay with, right? He's interested in your every inquiry, to questions. How do you see this? Teach me how to hear you, and to listen to you, and to understand, and to move forward with you. It's amazing. But I want you to see this. He also talked about this idea of something that would bear fruit. And we think about that a lot of times in the church. It's like, get saved and get out there. Well, I want to show you this. I think it's pretty interesting, and is a physical representation. There's a guy he's filmed plants for 15 years, and I want you to see this. This is a climbing pea. There's so many of those. He does all these different plants. But that was the climbing pea, and I hadn't noticed there was a cross in the back. That just blew my mind just then, by the way. We're so busy and we don't see this timeline of the natural order. We're seeing that in that picture, the structure of God's creation, right? You plant something in the ground and put a little water and some light. You don't germinate that seed, and you certainly don't make it grow, and you wait. And I see this little thing pop out of the soil. And is it fruit? Is it peas? Is it something you can eat? No. But then look at all those little tendrils. And, over the days, you see them moving. And I think we look at this and we go, well, it's alive in the sense that it's a plant. But I'm not paying attention to this, what's really going on. He sticks that cross in the back, right? The support structure. And if you look at that, it actually is fiddling and it's feeling its way around and it's saying, are you there? Are you stable? And it creates the fact that it's a cross just blew my mind. It starts touching this thing, and it grabs onto it. And it's a picture. It's a picture on so many levels of, in order for this thing, which is you, to bear fruit, or me, we have to grasp onto something, right? And we're testing it. We're saying, are you solid? Are you reliable? Can I trust you? And it's saying, hey. And what ends up happening is we grasp onto this and we grow with it, and we literally produce fruit from it. But it's such a picture of a process. And you're like, well, if God is outside of time, think of all that he has sent to us. Not only the scriptures, which are useful for teaching, rebuking, correcting, and training in righteousness, but also he sent to us like the heavens, right? And the baby and the relationship and all of these things. And we experience these in a linear form. And it's amazing to me, why? We've been told the lie is that we're alone, that this is just, you've evolved into this. This is an accident. Things bump together. There's nothing more than what you see in front of you. And it's so obvious to me and so clear to me that that's not the case. We see very dimly that there's so much more, that actually this isn't life, even though we're being trained, right? We're understanding this, but this is really, in my opinion, the secret of it, because what is the currency that God gives? He gives us peace that transcends all understanding. That's not money, right? If you look at the parable of the talents, which is in Matthew 25, it talks about 3 people that were given something by the landowner, and he's going to go away, and he comes back to see what they did with it. And one of them was scared of him. He said, "You're a harsh man. I buried mine in the sand." And what does the landowner do? He takes it from that one who is not a good steward and gives it to the ones who actually produce something from it. Well, that's just an analogy and a picture for the cards that you've been dealt. But the question is, if without me you can do nothing, we kind of have to understand who you are in order that we can do something. And I don't mean you can't go, like, choose where you go to lunch. Anything of eternal eternal benefit. But here's the crazy thing. By following Jesus and listening to what he has to say, it fulfills all that you were made for. Look at David, right? He fought the lion and the bear. What did he say when he saw Goliath? Everyone was scared. He's like, I got this. Why? Why did he get this? But because beforehand, God sent the lion and the bear so that you'd be prepared. Now I understand it. Why did we go through all these difficulties? Consider it pure joy when facing troubles of many kinds, these trials. Why? Because they're in preparation for a purpose that you were made for. It's absolutely stunning. Let's bring in ZZ Tesco. What's up, my brother?
Hello.
What's up, man? Dude, I'm so glad you are. I wanted to bring you on today because of yesterday. So Ray, for those of you who don't know, Ray and I office in the same spot, and we have for what? How many years is it now, Ray? 20 years at least.
Wow.
It's a long time.
Well, 20 more than that. 2002 was the official. January 2002 was the official date. So,
and we've literally been basically hanging out with each other daily, and really talking about Jesus the whole time, right? I mean, this has been pretty much our MO, is just syncing up with each other. And have we dealt with any trials of any kinds, Ray, in that period of time?
Yeah, we've dealt with trials of all kinds of kinds. So
and
even
it's
we didn't know we had, we still had. So
and it feels, I think a lot of times it feels almost like imprisonment or those type of things. I think if you were in the natural, you'd be like, ah, this really sucks. And there's a lot of people dealing with similar things right now because of where crypto is and everything. Very circumstantial. But let me ask you, you watched that clip from Steve. What stuck out to you? And then we'll get into kind of our Ray and I leveled up together yesterday, and we'll talk about that too. But any thoughts on what Steve had to say?
oh man, there was so much packed into that small space. I think the greatest thing out of all of that is that, and how can it not be? I mean, I also wrote down intolerable risk, but when he said that it's the relationship that you have with the one who is the truth.
Wow.
I mean, he didn't quite say it that way, I guess, but that's what he said. It's you know, he's all of this construct, all of this stuff that's going on, all these circumstances that are going on in your life is to help you craft your relationship with Jesus, who is the ultimate truth.
Well, he said he's the way, he's the truth, he's the life. And it's funny, when doesn't it resonate with you when he said people all over the place are saying, "Will you please just tell me the truth?" And we hear that in our society so often. I think people are saying that. Well, what are we asking for? I think a lot of times we think it's information. Well, let's go ask ChatGPT what the truth is. And what I think we don't realize that we're asking, and the beauty of this is it's so like Jesus that he's like, I am the truth. What does
Yeah.
that mean, Ray? What do you how do you see that when Steve says the truth is a person? What does he mean by that? The truth isn't information.
Don't know. I mean, I have a hard time fathoming that myself because I don't. I'm so used to the pattern being truth is information, and maybe that's part of the ultimate lie. Also, is that you know we're looking at truth in science, and if it can be provable, and if it can be repeated, and if it can be um, quantifiable, then that's the ultimate truth. I breathe air, it goes into my lungs, I can live. That's truth, right? So I don't know. I mean, it's then to say, well, it's the person. I'm like, well, how does that work? I don't know how that works. Um, but I do know that Jesus said it, and it's amazing because when you really unpack everything, all of this exists because of His word and what He spoke into existence and what He said. And so when you boil it all down, it is true that He is the truth.
When he said, I'm the way, so that's the directional, I'm the truth, and I am the life. And I think what we define as life and what we think life is kind of daisy chaining pleasures together, when Lambo. And what I think I've come to understand, and spending time with Steve and just experiencing life too, is that the things that really, really have value, I can't buy. And when you think about the truth, from a scientific perspective, it is only singularly faceted, right? It's only one glimpse. And it's like, well, what does it really mean that you as a person are the truth? And I think what's really interesting is the truth in a certain context may be information, but in its entirety, it's a person, in the sense that if we acknowledge the omnipotence and omnipresent and all-knowing nature of God who's outside of time, and it says that Jesus was all things were made for him and by him. So this whole thing has a structure and context, i.e., the P that climbs the cross. What's fascinating about that is all of those things are embodied in a person. And so what do we want? Well, I would like a straight path. I'd like good health. I'd like all these things. And it feels like to me, Ray, I'm constantly reminded of death and of of the shortness of this life. I mean, it was minutes ago, buddy, that we met. And here we are, old crusty dudes, and it's like, and we're only 50 something. And I look at that and I go, this thing is so short. But then I realize Steve is more alive now than he's ever been. And it's amazing. You remember last week we were looking at the near death experience stuff and all those commonalities and all these amazing things where literally people saw Jesus himself, and it wasn't like he was judging them. It was that the very essence of his holiness and light was just, you judged yourself. And it's just amazing that in this context, prior to this next phase of life, rather than death being this, judgment, or sorry about that, is what it's doing is it's reminding me that we're being prepared for something, right? If the person is the truth and the way and the life, well, those are the things that I want. I want the right direction, the straight path. I want to experience real life, not, a phony purchased alternative. And I want it to be truthful because I know that that's where peace is. And it's just so multifaceted. But I mean, I think there's a number of people who watch this. I was talking to our buddy Mike Ostel, and Mike's been, Steve and he were buddies. And right before, they were in the throes of a great conversation, and then he finds out that Steve has passed. And I got a text from Mike, and Mike's on the stream here, and he's having some challenges, health wise, and his wife, and all of these things, these challenges that you're facing. And it's like constantly reminded of the provision that is, and the preparation that this is for real life. I know that's a bit off topic, but that's what I was thinking. Thoughts?
Well, Mike, God's got a job for you to do. And it's going to be in a life that you're going to be able to see everything and clearly, and what really life is. And it's going to be amazing. And I just think, I think of us so proud of wanting to be used by God. Like a kid, you ever remember when you were a kid and you would work on the car with your dad, and you're like, that's it. I'm going to go in and I'm going to change the transmission myself. And he says, hey, can you hold the flashlight for me? And I'm like, yeah, okay. No, I need it over here. And it's going all over the place. And I'm looking at the bushes, I'm looking at this, I'm shining at my eyes. But just to be there and to be used and to have a job to do.
Yeah.
Or the time that you and your cousins were there, and he didn't ask them to help him with the car. He knowingly gives you even more responsibility when they're there, because then they get to see you do the cool stuff. Wow. And you're like, what a privilege that would be, and if, I wish I could encourage Mike to just say, it's coming. Jesus has got a plan for you. And then he's got work for you to do.
In this moment he does. And, I think it's hard for, my mom's, pretty much homebound, and I think about a lot of people, and, Mike's got plenty of life in him, and he's spunky. But what's amazing is that it's a moment by moment thing. And it's like, he's always been enough. And there's a role for us all in each part of this life. And it's funny you said about your dad. My dad, it made me feel so good. You think about the Father inviting you into his work, right? My dad was, we grew up really poor, and our house was very small, and there were 3 boys, so 5 of us with one little bathroom and not enough rooms. And my dad decided he was going to take the garage and turn it into a room. That's where my parents would be. And he was building out in the garage a closet. And, he was putting the studs in and stuff like that. And I was young. I mean, I don't know if I was 12, but I was left-handed. And my dad said, hey, man, come here. And, think about this, the Father, right? Just imagine Jesus, think about God saying, hey, come here. You're like, yeah, right, I'm listening. Yeah, I'm coming. hey, you've got a left hand that works better than my left hand. Right? That's what my dad said. He's like, I need you to reach in here and I need you to hammer in this nail because I can't get to it with my left hand. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like you need me to help you with something? And I'm like, this is the coolest thing. I was with my dad, and of course, my dad was an amazing, amazing guy, and I didn't get to spend as much time as I wanted to. And of course, to me, my dad was like larger than life. And here I was, smelling the cigarette smoke and the sulfur from matches, and I was hammering in a nail for my dad because he was like, now the question is, could he have gotten that nail in? Yeah, probably. But what did he do when he said to me, hey, come here, you got a left hand? And I experienced that as well when I bought my grandmother sold me her 1978 Cutlass Supreme for $500. And that was my first car. I was like 15 and a half and it needed a lifter job. The lifters were knocking. And that summer, my dad said, all right, let's do this lifter job. And dude, and you know what that's like, right? All the vacuum tubes, taking off the carburetor, the intake manifold gasket, then going in and the rocker arms and the push rods down to I didn't know a single thing about engines. And, there was no like YouTube and there was no camera phone. And like we're taping off the vacuum lines and writing stuff down on it. And I'm digging out sludge with a spoon and my dad, and it was the most satisfying and greatest thing. And I think that's a big picture of what you're saying of this, like working with the Father is saying, hey, what do you got? And to think that we can go to one who is the truth, it impacts so many other things. And we experienced that yesterday. We experienced that this morning, is that when you encounter the truth, it resonates across it has the implications of it resonate across all kinds of things. It has application across so many things, like your marriage, your business, like how you just manage life. Any comments about all of that and potentially this whole, like I jokingly say we leveled up yesterday, but we leveled up through pain and through difficulty.
Well, I think that's the hard part because I don't like pain. I don't like difficulty. I like to know that things are in order. And I like the confidence of knowing that I'm walking into a situation. And then there's the whole level of my own insecurity where, I feel like I would go off the rails, you know? Do people like me? Do I seek approval from others? Like, all these things. But ultimately this is a training ground. And I love what he said. I guess intolerable risk when he was talking about that. When he said that, I was like, well, what does that mean? Intolerable risk. He said it's listening to Jesus. And I wrote down one of the thoughts that I had is that it's hard for me to trust the system that Jesus put into place in listening to him. Because I immediately you say, well, did Jesus really say that? Give that guy $400. Really? Because conventional wisdom says this. Human wisdom says no. Do this for my wife. No. That doesn't make sense to me. And then I go, well, do I trust? Am I trusting? And so one of the things that I appreciate about Steve is he was very good at discerning what spirits he heard in that. Remember the time you shared with him, one of the guys that was like, I'm a prophet guy.
Yeah.
And and I'm going to give you a prophetic word about this. And Steve got 2 minutes, like 30 seconds in, and he said, stop. I already know what he's going to say. He said, because these are the spirits that I hear him saying. And I go, how does Steve know that?
Yeah.
How do you know that? And he said, because Steve went through the training of what am I really listening to in this? What's really going on behind the scenes in what I just heard? Jesus, help me see it how you see it. And can I trust that the way Jesus sees it is always the best way? And it's like, wow. And then, I don't doubt that Jesus is everything. What I doubt is my ability to interface with him in
Yeah.
a way that I'm confident that I am doing the right thing. And
And
so
that's what he started with. That was what's so cool. What you're saying, that's exactly what that clip started with. Is I remember sitting with Katie. He came down and saw me, like traveled like 11 hours to come down to Austin when I was at this conference, and I met him for the first time. And dude, he's a bad dude, man. He's tough. And what's amazing is he asked me that exact question because I was talking the same way to him, and we were at this, in the hotel bar there. And he said, "Well, how do I know it's him?" And I asked that same question as Steve. And he started this whole clip with that whole deal is to say, guys, our expectation is that we can just literally go to this machine. And if we beep, 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 hit the right buttons, we get this answer out. And that's why the truth is a person. It's a relationship and a journey. And the expectations you have is you have to come to him like a child. And I think about that seed. There's so many agricultural analogies that Jesus gives in the scriptures about the seed and what kind of soil it's in. And if you think about this idea of where do I start? Well, look, first off, are you interested in knowing? And it starts there. And of course, you get overly confident, I think, once you start learning some of this stuff, but you realize, no, this is a journey and you don't immediately plant a seed and have corn. It takes time, right? We talk about it in crypto as like trustless yield, right? You've got to wait, right? You've got to delay gratification. And in a way, it's like, well, yeah, do I trust this process? And I thought it was great that Steve said, he put together a program, right? And so many people are looking to these things and going, well, I need the next book or I need the next program. I need the next algorithm or the next formula. He said, no, it's not a formula. It's this journey of relationship, but also saying the only person who can teach you how to hear from him is him himself. But I think one of the biggest things for me was he said, what's your intent? What is intent as it relates to interest? I'm intending to hear from you. And what ends up happening is I hear from other things that are not the truth, right? That we talked about the open ports.
Mhm.
And what is the first example of this is Eve in the garden. Here they've talked and walked with God this whole time prior to Satan coming in through the serpent. And he's like, hey, that guy didn't say that. So there are lies that are being told to you. And so think about this and this is the aha for me. You're going to hear all kinds of things, right? How do you know what is true unless you ask the truth? Okay, so I'm going to say it again. I'm hearing all of these things. And so I have a choice. I can either go my own way and go, yeah, I'm going to make this decision, or I can inquire for the one who is the truth. And what Steve basically said to me is, what's your intent? Well, I want to know the truth. Okay. He's interested in your every inquiry. So what is the fall that we call the fall, which is not a fall at all? It's literally Eve going, you know what? I got this decision myself. I've got access to the guy who knows all things. And there's a confusion. Somebody's coming in and telling me something and saying that guy lied to us. And instead of going to that guy and going, hey, what do you mean by this? How do you see this? I got this serpent who is wise telling me that you're wrong. She didn't do that. She went on her own and she gave her authority over. And what do we see from that? We're in this training ground of understanding and determining between the truth and the lie. And so we see this all the time. Right? How many times have you had somebody in a relationship say, you're this, you're just this, right? Imagine people who are declaring something about you that isn't true. And they're using that to draw you off sides, to get you upset, to manipulate you. And a lot of times we overreact to those things rather than going, hang on, I'm going to stop, back up and ask the truth. I'm going to ask Jesus how he sees this. And I'm going to tell you this. I'm going to testify to this every time I've done this. Every time I've done this. And I've declared, Jesus, only you have the authority to speak to me. I'm only listening to you. Satan, you have no standing here. Satan flees, and he shows me the way through. and it's real. It's not, this isn't like, oh, let's just kind of talk about. No, this is real stuff with real value and real peace. Period. And so it's extremely simple. But Steve said, once you see it, you can't unsee it. What's so cool about that is he said absolutely right, because all you have to do is shut up and listen. The spirits will reveal themselves because they don't have inherent authority. That's why sin's crouching at the door. It's at the door because you have the authority to let it in. It doesn't, because here's the thing, if it had the authority to destroy you, it would have destroyed us long ago. And this whole thing of authority is so big. And it's like, no wonder he said, without me, you can do nothing. Nothing of any real value. And Steve joked with me, Ray. He said, hey, you're going to get to the point where those spirits are going to be lying to you. And you're going to say, all right, what you got? What do you got? I'll take what you got and you can beat it. And I was like, I can't imagine that. I haven't, that's like the green belt. I don't have the green belt yet. But what's incredible about this is these are real things. And I think the big lie is that, well, you're just the descendant of a monkey. Thoughts?
Well, yeah, I mean, and this is all there is. And so the thing that I find so amazing about this, and I don't know about you guys, but sometimes I hear some of this time with Steve Staggs episodes, and I start thinking about it. And all I want to do is sit at the feet of Jesus and ask him questions,
Yeah.
And I think about the way this whole model is set up, and in some places you have to go ask the priest first to do
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah. The
In some
barrier.
places, and when that, and then we say, well, then the Protestants would say, well, okay, well that's not true. You don't need to go to the priest anymore. But positionally, the priest doesn't exist in the equation. But we have pastors, and then practically, we do exactly the same thing, and we just go to the pastor, and we say, well, you can go to Jesus, but why? I go to the pastor. I just go every week, and all I have to do is just listen and check off my box, and I'm good to go, right? So practically, they do exactly the same thing.
Well, and the difference is there's in the game or on the sidelines. And I think about this, we're coming into in a very pivotal and important time. And there's a group of people that sense it, right? And I think that the Lord Jesus has been revealing to so many people across the globe that this is the time. And when I first heard about the transfer, what Steve talked about, I was like, is this a transfer of wealth? No, it's a transfer of the man, because he said all tools are neutral. So there's so many tools around us, right? All kinds of new tools, AI tools and internet tools and, all kinds of things, robots, all kinds of tools. Well, we're reminded constantly by Steve that, hey, all tools are neutral and they are animated by a certain nature and character. Why is it that someone's nature and character decides to shoot up a school? And why does someone's nature and character defend a family? And what is so beautiful about it is, it is kind of simple in this idea of, well, if I was made in your image as your Elohim man, this man who has authority, and my job is to follow you. And what is this? I rule over the things that are not appropriate, and I reign over the things that are good. And what is the end up? Well, I bless and protect those around me. Well, blessing and protecting, what does that do? I just think about in our families, Ray. Everybody
Yeah.
that's in a family is challenged with all kinds of things. And what's funny is I almost feel like there's a point system in a lot of families where it's like, well, if I do this and you do this, you get this. And there's like this formula in it. Then people are playing this game. And it's like, when I look at the scriptures and I see these people and it says, hey, salvation has come to your household, there's a hierarchy and there is a blessing that is covering. And if you think about this leadership in the world, whether it be presidents and oh man, the debate last night and all of the things that happen there, but do you realize that he has given you authority over things that you would bless and protect? And in a way, all of these stewardship conversations about the talents and investment and using things wisely is like, how are you doing at home? Are you in this to get yours? Are you in this to manipulate your wife and your kids to get your thing? Are you
Mhm.
trying to set up your own little fiefdom where everyone pays tribute to you? And you and I were talking yesterday, and God gave me literally a visual image of this, that He is a straight path, and that there are kind of two sides of this, which is like a waveform, right? Think about a line; it's almost like a dollar sign, right? You got a waveform and a line, and on one side, it's like we're told in this kind of Matthew Tate sort of way. Andrew Tate, sorry, not Matthew Tate. Andrew Tate, this like domination thing, right? Be a man, alpha.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you think about, well, what does that get you, right? Well, you dominate. Well, this is one side of this curve. You can go your own way and dominate the situation. And then what's the opposite side? You can be a total pansy, right? And I think about this a lot of times, is that especially in a lot of relationships, when you're in a weak position, what you want to do is you want to manipulate the one who has this power or authority. And so what we find ourselves doing is, I almost feel like it's like driving on a road and slamming against the guardrails, like just bam and bam and bam, back and forth and back and forth, and just destroying this vehicle as you drive down this highway rather than going straight path. And it's like Jesus, like, I am the way. I'm the way through this. And you have the choice to go your own way. But what does it say? Your way leads to death. Because what is sin? Sin isn't like, people think it's like, well, sin is this list of things. No, sin is going your own way, doing it apart from Him, whatever it may be. And where does that lead? Well, it leads to death. And that path is wide, it leads to destruction. It's like, well, okay. Well, why would I want to hold every thought captive to you? Well, you're the truth, and you're the way, and you're the life. There's so much benefit and promise in it. And it's like, it's so counterintuitive, but we've been told that success in this life is get yours, bank account, here's the number. How you doing? Lord it over, socially signal, have a nice watch. Gold is best. You know, it's a lie. It's a lie. And so many people are like, I just got to get another fix, man. I just got to get another fix. If I just had this deal, if I just had this money, if I just had this crypto, if I just had this thing, then things would be okay. I was right there. And He's showing us it's not about that. It's not about that. Because I think about this. What is there any more joy in the peace of a peaceful home with safe and protected family for you and me? I don't think there is. Now, is there a financial component to that? Yeah. Is there like a non-leaky roof component to that? Yeah. Is there an air conditioning and power component to that? Yeah. There's a lot of things that are contingent there. But boy, when it comes together, you're just like, what does it give you? The thing that you cannot buy, which is a peace that transcends all understanding. Whew. It's what we want, and that's what He offers. It's like, are you going to follow me? And it's amazing, the patience. We were talking about this before. Aren't you blown away by the grace and the patience? Because I almost look at us and I go, you guys are idiots.
So when we had kids, and I love my kids, and they're amazing. But and you can, and I'm sure every one of you guys who have seen kids or videos of kids have seen this happen. There's a time in which a child learns how to run, but they don't really equate looking forward with running. That these two things have to happen at the same time. So I have there are always videos, and you just picture the kid running literally as fast as they can in a circle, but they're watching you the entire time. And you're like, this is only a matter of time before they run into something that they didn't see. And I think that's kind of the way we are, is okay, God, we got this. I'm going to run on and do my own thing. And then I'm going to go do this without you. And Jesus is saying, no, you don't understand. I'm the truth. Remember? Oh yeah. Well, the truth is, if I'm running and I don't see what's coming, I'm going to run right into the brick wall. And Jesus knows that. And how do you teach people who have zero concept of anything? How do you teach them the things that you need them to learn, so that when they get to the next life, when they get to the time when they're in life for eternity, that that you know that they know what to do. They know who to listen to. And Jesus said it, in John 10, like that my sheep hear my voice, and they're in the pen, and I am the gate. I let sheep in and sheep out. Well, not out, but he takes care of the sheep, and the sheep hear his voice,
They recognize his voice
and
even
they
more than
recognize
hear
his
it.
voice.
Well,
And
and
so
that's the crazy thing. That's the whole thing I think Steve taught us is like, how do I recognize his voice?
and I don't, and it's funny because when we use language that Steve used, which is a little bit different than what I've heard, and so I was always careful in listening to everything that you said and thinking to myself, I'm does that go along with all the Baptist, not say Baptist, but the fundamental Christian thinking that I've studied for years, and say, does it fit? And in every piece of it that I've heard Steve talk about fits into what we've understood. What does the Bible say? Always go back to what does the Bible say, and the Bible says these things, but then practically we don't live these things. And I think when I hear you say, I can go to ask Jesus, and I go, whoa, 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 whoa. I've been taught by the church that that's not humility. I can't be humble and go talk to Jesus, because Jesus is way up here and I'm down here, and I can't, almost as if I've been taught to just genuflect because I not worthy. How can I talk to Jesus? I'm not worthy. And Jesus says, no, 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 no. Come to me. Come to me. And I'm like, no, no, no. I can't do that. I have to be humble.
Well, and you know what Steve called that to me? He said, that is the spirit of the church, and it's a lie. And it's not the spirit of the ecclesia. Okay. So the understanding of what we would call church, they're not the same term, is to say that there are systems and belief systems and structures, and they're different by locality. You could go from one church to the next 10 minutes down the road, and they're different. We build these belief systems, we build these structures around them, and we convince each other that this is the way. And what's interesting is Jesus didn't say, build a church and that's the way. He said, I am the way. And what's amazing about it is what you're saying is, why do these things match up with the scriptures, right? And it's challenging, I think, to the spirit of the church. And I mean that by this lie that you have to go through the priest, or this lie that hey, can check the box, because that that's actually faulty. And, if you were to press someone, if you were to press a pastor or whatever, and you say, hey, is Jesus alive and does he speak to his people? You have to say yes to that if you understand the scriptures. You have to know that. I think what's hard, though, is there's a lot of judgment in hold on, do you hear from Jesus? And do you hear more than I do? And there's not this, it's almost like we're so quick to say, and Steve received this so many times. Well, who are you to say you listen to Jesus? Because the people right now that are claiming that they hear from Jesus have made it a business. They've made it a profession. And I joked on one of the streams, it's the prophet and the prophetess. It's like, come to me. We're the ones that are closer to God. We're the ones that hear from God. And they always have a word for you, brother. And it's become a mechanism in which they're using this to build a kingdom for themselves. And Jesus warned of this. But I think what's amazing is it's very tempting that when you're running a business of a church, right? You have a building and rents and electricity and all kinds of things. And then there's marriages and funerals, and there's tons of counseling, and there's carnage going all around, and there's programs and everything that, well, what is the spirit of the church? And I don't mean the spirit of Jesus. I mean the spirit of the church. It's a mechanism in which we are exhausted by. It's a manufactured sense of worldly good stuff that seem good. And you know what it's built on, why you know it's a lie? Is because it's built on the back of what you're going to do for God. And I remember sitting in the Gen Con, and Danny's brother asked this question of Steve, and he said this, about the things that you do for God. And Steve stopped him. He said, hang on a second. You can't do anything for God. And of course, Danny's brother's like, what are you talking about, Willis? He said, hang on a second. Think about this. When you do
Yeah.
something for someone, you obligate them. Jesus is not obligated by you. So in a way, the whole message is, no, that's the spirit of the church that says you need to do things for God, Ray. Get out there and do things for God. No, that's the lie. We do things
Well, I do my
we do things with Jesus. We do things with God. We listen to
well,
him and we go where he tells us, not we make up the things and go, hey, come over here where I did some stuff and bless this. That obligates him and he will not be obligated.
I know that when I talk to my wife with language that says, honey, I want to do this with you, it's a much different conversation than, see, I just got flowers for you. Now, I mean, she loves that I thought about her, but she likes it even more when I want to work together with her to collaborate to do something even greater than we could have done on our own. And but I'm not bashing the church necessarily, but it is a way to keep us in the stands in a way, like it's a way to, it's sometimes I think that we are content to just go, oh good, I'm going to sit in the third row in this box seat over here and behind third base, and I can see the players on the field. Great job, players. I support you. I bought a ticket so you could play. And then Steve would say, well, don't you want to get in the game? I'm like, whoa. That involves listening and actually trusting Jesus. One of the hard things as a dad for me was telling my child about, telling my daughter about Jesus from the standpoint that I can't make any decision that child makes. I can't do anything that my daughter does. Like, I can't make her decisions for her. She makes those decisions. And it's scary as a dad to go, because I want to make all the decisions for her and just make it easy. I want her to have a safe and beautiful and wonderful life. But will Jesus do with her what he's doing with me? And do I trust that? Do I trust that?
Yeah.
And so all of this squeezing of the circumstances and the frustration and the angst that I just want to punch everything that moves sometimes. And Jesus is squeezing me and saying, are you looking to the one who is the truth? And let's develop this relationship with me so that you hear my voice. And when you do, then there's peace beyond any peace I could have imagined.
Yeah.
There's, doesn't mean that, we only see things from this perspective, and we only see things from this life. We were talking earlier about electricity and that there's the right-hand rule. Well, there's a magnetic wave for every electric wave. There's a magnetic wave. We don't see it. It's almost like we see dimly the next life, but Jesus sees it fully, and he's helping us learn how to trust him in this process with all of our circumstances.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Well, you mentioned you don't want to bash the church. Well, let's also understand what we mean by the church. There's no bashing intended at all. Here's the thing that's interesting. I know a number of pastors who are, have great intention, right?
Yeah.
And there's systems and circumstances that have been built up. And here's the thing. It doesn't have to happen just in a church. The beauty of this, though, is even in the midst of, faulty design and belief systems, there is amazing grace in those things. Because if you were to ask any pastor who is just worn to the bone, right? He's just worn out. I'm like, hey, how you hearing from God these days? He's like, I can't even barely hear from anybody. He's worn out. You still look across the church and you see people, right? Because what we've equated with the church is some sort of building or some sort of belief system. And of course, it's all part and parcel of the same thing. These are lies, right? There are lies that are being told to us that we believe. And so we replace one thing for another. And so it's so common that the evil forces are trying to say, of course he didn't say that. You don't need to go to him. You can make up your own mind because you're Elohim. You got the ability to choose. You're like him. And it's trying to get you to basically make decisions without counsel. It's saying, no, you don't need to ask him. And I think what ends up happening is we build these structures and we rest on them, right? It's like building a house. It's like, well, yeah, I need something that's going to keep me out of the rain. But what we build in these structures, we end up relying on them and they replace the person of Jesus, right? They replace him and they end up becoming activity, and they're used to essentially wear you out and keep you out of the game. And what you think is beneficial is the work of man. And what did he say? You received your reward in full. And I think a lot of this stuff it's not that we shouldn't feed the poor, right? It's not that we shouldn't take care of widows and orphans. But I think so much of this time is to say, rather than doing the things that you see in the scriptures, do the things that you're asked to do in the moment, right? And I think about this for a second. It's like, we've talked so many times about the guy who, he needed a ride. He was a homeless guy. And I gave him a ride, and I had $400 in my pocket because a guy had given me payment for a car that I sold to him. And I literally was like, well, in my natural thinking, dropping him off, and I'm like, I should give him some money. And so I give him $20, and the Lord says to me, give it all to him. I'm like, what are you talking about? Give a homeless guy $400? And he's like, no, give it to him. And I'm like, all right, fine. It was 2 years later, Ray, when I got that phone call from my buddy going, hey, you remember that guy you gave $400 to? He's right here. He wants to talk to you. He's like, hey, man. I'm like, dude, how you doing? I mean, it's 2 years later. I gave him $400 one night. He's like, hey, remember when you gave me that $400? I got to give it back to you. I'm like, no, you don't. What are you talking about? I was like, just give it to somebody else. He goes, no, that night I bought crack and I got higher than I've ever gotten before. And the Lord Jesus appeared to me and told me to stop doing crack. So I did. I didn't see that in the church manual. It's not in the church manual. And what's interesting about it is the amazing journey of listening and following Jesus. It does not require the building, but he's still he's going to accomplish what he has planned to accomplish. But I think that when you think about this John 10:10 concept of having life and having it to its fullest, is that what do you want? We're wired for this relationship, which is a straight path in which we literally follow him. That's the whole point. And the thing that is amazing to me is why? Why is it structured this way? It's structured this way, I believe, because it talks about a future in which there are cities. And it talks of a future where there is a hierarchy and there's work to do. And the question I have is, if this has been shortened from 1,000 years to 120, it sounds like when he taught us to pray, our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Well, we have a responsibility to make this place look like that place. And in the process of looking that way, we end up essentially being vetted for the future of life. Steve's probably in charge of quite a bit, in my opinion. Why? Because he was interested and he said, Jesus, teach me how to hear from you. And of course, think about it in a military situation. If you're a general or you're somebody that's leading, do you like it when your subordinates go their own way? What kind of an army would you have if people didn't listen? I mean, just imagine that. You were trying to organize anything, an army, a company, and people just were like, all right, this is what the boss says. We're going to do our own thing. I mean, that thing fails immediately. And it's amazing how the structure of things it's built a certain way. And Steve, for his whole, life, he basically said, all right, I'm interested. What do you got? And I'm just here really to testify and to remind people, you go to him. You don't listen to me. You don't listen to ZZ Tesco. I mean, Steve is helpful, but all we're men who are just saying, hey, this direction, this is the guy. He's the way, the truth, the life. If you want to experience those things, the satisfying of your soul is not through what you think it is. And it's like, wow. I want to have life and I want to have it to its fullest. All right. Follow me. Okay. All right.
Well, I think the fear is this is one of my fears in doing that, Matt, is that am I turning my back on everything that I've ever been taught in the church? No. Am I turning my back on what the Bible says? No. Matter of fact, and I love my wife because she always challenges me in this direction. She says, "Well, why would you? How would you be listening to Jesus when He's already given us the Bible? And shouldn't you go there first?" And in some ways, she's right. But what I've seen God, what I've seen Him use the Bible for, is when I read it, it's like and you say this so well. We still have to get up and and um, and do the work. You know, like we still have to. I guess where I'm going with this was that God uses the Bible to help teach us things, and right for 2 Timothy 3:16, all scriptures
God breathe.
God breathed and given by God for reproof, correcting in righteousness and training and um but it's so true. I find that the more that I read the Bible, the more I have the words that He brings to mind at the right times for me to be able to hear it. 'Cause He's like, "Oh yeah, remember in the manual I said this? Oh yeah, that's what that was."
It's
Um,
so funny.
it's
Go ahead.
oh, well, it's only made things sweeter.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not because when I say I want to hear from Jesus, it's not that I'm hearing anything new. I'm hearing things that He's already said. There's some things that are new because He obviously didn't say in Hezekiah 25:12, give $400 to the homeless man.
Right.
Um, but all of that is a way to show me where I need to listen and who I need to listen to. And Jesus is the truth. He's the way that I get onboarded with salvation. Going, I come to an understanding of who He is, but He's also the truth, and that anything that I can talk to Him about, I can, He's probable. Just like Steve said, go ask Him yourself.
Well, and you think about it, what is the Bible? It calls itself a testament. And what is a testament but a testimony? And what is it testifying to? What Jesus said, right? The speaking of God. And I think what's really interesting is it was so important that we preserved it, right? And in some cases in its translation, it's gotten changed. But the point is, Ray, if I said to you, hey, take some time and write down all the things Jesus has done in your life, that would be a testament of Ray. You would testify to the great work of Jesus. But those things were from the spoken words of Him. And what's I think really amazing is it says the Bible is useful for teaching, rebuking, correcting, and training in righteousness. It doesn't say worship it. And Steve was so good with this. This was so great, is that the Bible is a tool and it's a reminder, just like we are to each other. But what's unbelievable about it is it's consistent over 66 books in 1,500 years and 44 authors or whatever it is. And what's amazing about that is it's further, testifying to that. But I think what's amazing is that the church, at least that I experienced and kind of came up in, wants you to worship the Bible. Because they basically made this point, and this is the thing that frustrated me the most. Jesus was a good guy. He's alive on Easter Sunday. You need to now come under the authority of a book. And Steve made it really clear. If a new kid moves in down the road and you want to meet him, do you go find a book about him and read the book? No. When Moses went up on the mountain and the first book was written on stone, and then it was broken. And I think this is the brilliant thing. It just blows my mind. It got broken. Did he go, oh crap, let's glue it back together? Because He gave me the thing to worship. No, it's stone. It's the 10 Commandments. Let me epoxy it together to carry it back down, because that's what I worship. I worship a piece of rock that God wrote on. No, He went back to the author and said, hey, can I get another copy? We don't worship the book. We worship the author. We go to the source. And I think that that's the big lie. And that's why kind of the spirit of the truth stems from this idea that he's dead and has nothing to say. And of course, the woman at the well is like, hey, you Jews, you worship on that mountain. And what does Jesus say to her? There's a day coming when you will worship in spirit and in truth. What does that mean if it is not direct? And that's what's so amazing about this is if he's alive and he speaks, he's approachable and you can go to him. And that's all I'm saying. And you know what's funny is that's what the Bible says too. In the greatest one, Ray, oh my gosh, we talked about this today and I just have to say it. Nebuchadnezzar literally told the people, all the seers, everybody who was in the land that there were the wise guys. He said, I'm going to kill you if you don't tell me what my dream means. Right? Nebuchadnezzar, he's the king. He's got this dream that he wants interpreted. And of course, when you think about it, Daniel and Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego. So we've got 4 guys. They're buds. They're in that region, and they're kind of caught up in the sorcerers and seers and all these wise guys. And here's the cool thing. If you actually read that, there's fear. You know, Nebuchadnezzar has put fear into these guys going, I'm going to start killing people until you tell me what this dream means. And you know what they did? We've lifted up Daniel and all these things as well. He must be closer to God than Ray. You know what they did? Those 3 buddies, four guys, like, I don't know what this means. Why don't we ask the guy who knows? Because we know him. And so it says in the scriptures that they asked him. Here's the crazy thing. That same thing that Daniel and his buddies did is the same thing you can do. They knew who knew the answer to that. They didn't have it inherently because he was Daniel, the prophet. No, he was just a guy that recognized where the truth was. And look what God did through all of that by giving him. And it's amazing. He praised the Lord. And that's what's so amazing. I feel like we miss these things. Like I've read these stories before, and then I see this and I go, oh my gosh, he did the exact same thing I'm doing. He went to the guy who's the source and said, hey, how do you see this? He said, well, let me tell you what that dream is. Well, what were the implications of Daniel in that dream? Amazing. But it's so amazing. That's why I feel like if I was God, I'd be like, you guys are idiots. And he's so patient with us because how many times has he told us the same story over and over and over again? And then on top of that, he comes here himself. I almost feel like it's my dad when he said, if you kids keep it up, I'm going to literally stop this car and knock your heads together. God doesn't do that, like the grace of God to say, no, I'm going to come here and I'm going to literally show you the way. And it's like, hello, have you not gotten the picture yet? And I think that that's really the point of us doing this stream and lifting up the fact that Steve was so great. And here's the other things. There's 86 people here, and most of them are on Twitter. Dude, something has happened with this whole series, and I just want to thank you. If you're out there listening, 87 people, and I'm sending it to 3 channels. It used to be that YouTube was where everything was at. No, everything is coming in through Twitter. And if you're watching this on Twitter, I want to say thanks for being here. Throw something in the comments there. But for 37 episodes, of which you heard a clip from number 37, there was like 10 people, 7 people, 12 people. And now I'm just so thankful that there are more people out there. And I know there's a lot of people that love Steve. A lot of people are just intrigued by this whole thing. A lot of people have very different views. Here's the thing. The one thing I'm not saying is, you need to this is not a religion. This is a person. And the question is, we were designed for it. And I think the amazing thing is we're coming into a time where God is doing amazing things in this time. And I believe that there is this transfer that's happening that Steve talked about. And that transfer isn't the transfer of wealth. Although you may see that, it's really the transfer of the person to go from not listening to these lies, but listening to the one who is the author of it all. And that's where life is. That's what I've experienced. You and I experienced like the most amazing thing yesterday. And it's something we can barely use English words to describe. It's just something we have to say, hey, try it on for size, try it yourself. You will not be disappointed.
And if I were to just be an encouragement to anybody who's listening who thinks, man, I've really screwed this up or whatever, I do this very poorly. I do this very badly. I don't listen to Jesus as often as I need to, but when I do, I realize it's like I realize I'm in the presence of greatness, and you know, doing things Jesus's way and doing it with Jesus is way better than I could have imagined it to be. So if you're like me and you're like, well, I screwed that up. That's not redeemable. Oh, yes, it is. Because the next decision that you make can be with Jesus. It doesn't, you don't have to unpack like 50 years of onion to get to the root cause when you were a child and somebody took your lollipops and that's why you behave a certain way. No.
Well,
Just
are you
the very next
interested?
decision.
Are you interested?
Are you interested? Do you want to play the game?
Yeah. Are you interested? I mean,
So
here's the cool thing. I mean, I shared that plant growing. Steve said many times about the baby. You come to him as an infant and you say, hey, teach me how to hear from you. And for me, what's been amazing is the process by which God has worked with me has been visual images, pictures of things, and then speaking. That's been very, very consistent for me. And it's really somewhat activated by when I'm literally interested in knowing, right? So when I stop and back up and go, hey, how do you see this? It's like, all right, here's a picture, and then here's some understanding of that picture. That's for me. And I'm sure there are very different things. I mean, I remember I said when in the early streams, I said to Steve, I said, dude, like this morning, like Jesus told me this place in the Bible. He goes, yeah, that happened very early on for me. I was like, oh man, I'm just getting started. And he goes, here's the thing. The scriptures are useful. They're very useful. And what's amazing is that the things that I think that are coming, they will ring true because they're similar, but there's new things coming. And what I mean by that of new things, new circumstances, new situations that we're being trained to deal with. And the only way to deal with those is to understand it from his perspective. And it says you are seated with him in the heavenly realms, meaning you can have the perspective he has. You're sitting with him. And Steve did the greatest talk at the Gen Con conference about looking at the high places, that we on earth fixed on the ground are building things and we look up to them. And he says, no, you are seated with me and you see things from my perspective. Are you interested in seeing things from my perspective? And so many of the Pharisees and Sadducees were so confused about this, and they tried to catch him in all these things. And it's like, it's amazing. Anyway, Ray, thank you so much. Thank you so much for being on this.
Yeah, thank you. I was listening to the debate last night, and it just occurred to me, aside from us being doomed, that it doesn't matter.
Jesus has got this, bro.
Because tomorrow I'm going to wake up and ask Jesus how he sees this and what he wants. And then the next day, I get to wake up again. Jesus, how do you see this? What can I do today?
Well, in every moment, you've got the option to do that. I think, we're facing troubles of many kinds. What I realized is he was using those troubles to help me understand something important. I had to go through the pain to experience what he had for me. It was in preparation. And I think some of it also is a real test. When you're faced with these things, are you going to go your own way? Or are we going to do this together? And I feel like there's a real big part about this is like, no, I want to go the hard way and do it myself, and I want to be dragged across the gravel. No? Or do you want to do this together? And it's not like doing it is not difficult, but one of the challenges of like being in the game or on the sidelines is I've even been convicted that, I feel like it's very difficult to be in the game if you aren't capable. And one of the things that was interesting to me is I was speaking with Jesus, and he said to me, Matt, I don't cause you to move, you cause you to move. I that's not in the Bible, or I guess I could find something in the Bible. He said it directly to me, and I was like, what do you mean by that? And now I've come to realize, well, I love pizza, Ray. Love pizza. I have diabetes. I can't eat pizza. I love pizza, Ray. I love pizza. And here's the thing.
It's a
I
time.
could eat a lot of pizza. I could be 300-400 pounds. I could, have really, really bad health from what I put in my mouth. And I was thinking about this, like he says, I don't cause you to move, you cause you to move. You have this ability. I created opposable thumbs. You have this creative ability in me, but you have to make choices to follow me. You have to actually make a choice to follow me. And the conviction I have is like, your head may be in the game, but your body's not. Like, how do we, and I was thinking about this, the stewardship over this temple of the Holy Spirit, this like literal embodiment of Jesus is like, how do I follow you if I can't walk? Well, it's not just a physical thing, but there's a combination of these things where you do have to act. You are my hands and feet. You are an extension of me. I am the vine, you are the branches. And I'm like, I was imagining that little pea. I'm the vine. It can't find that cross to wrap around unless it's connected to the vine. It's like he's extended himself out, and it's like, wow, you have work for us to do. It's clear. And I make ways. I'm like, I make plans. This is what I'm doing. It's like, oh, really? Is that what you're doing? And I think about this. It's like, all right, there's a time for everything. Plan, think through. But I think you want to have like joy and peace, and you want to have, an amazing experience in life. Ask him how he sees all of the things that you're considering. Because even Eve, which is like the beginning of it all, it's like, I want to make this choice on my own. So what did Steve say? This is the pithy statement of Steve. He said, why did God create? God created his man so that he would rule with him in the fullness of his nature and character. We've been given this place to have dominion over it. But the way he created his man in his image so that he would do it with him in his nature and character. And how do we do that? By blessing and protecting, by ruling and reigning in the fullness of his nature and character. Wow. What would it look like if I led my family in the fullness of his nature and character? The fullness of his nature and character isn't positional or manipulating. It blesses and protects. It rules over the things that are bad, and it reigns over the things that are good. And the question is, are you being a blessing, and are you protecting the things you have authority over? Or are you being manipulated and giving your authority away and losing? It's amazing. It's amazing grace. Ray, thanks for joining the Pulse today, my friend. And we will catch you next time. I appreciate it. You're a amazing person.
Thanks for having me.
As much time. Yeah. Thank you, buddy. All right. I'll catch you in just a minute in the next room. Wow. Folks, thanks for joining the Pulse today. Thanks for joining Stephen Friday. And I'm so thankful for my buddy Steve. So Steve Staggs, if you're new to this whole thing, let's see if we can get Steve played professional baseball for the Toronto Blue Jays. That was the expansion team in 1970 something. And then he played for, I think, the Oakland A's as well. And he played down in Venezuela, something like that. God made Steve. And I think he was 6 years old, and the pastor said, hey, you want to meet Jesus? And he's like, yeah, I'm interested in meeting this guy. Where's he at? He said, I'd like to introduce you to Jesus. And he made a guy who was so disciplined, but also so interested. He talked about a curveball. He saw a curveball for the first time. He's like, I got to figure out how to hit that thing. But what's amazing about the discipline and the way God crafted him, he was unique from you and from me. But what did he do? He decided to apply that same rigor and interest in understanding how this whole thing was set up. And what he came to understand is the truth. He came to understand that Jesus is alive and he speaks. And when I met him, I said, "Hey, yeah, the Lord told me to unlock global generosity by giving." And he says, "I've been called to men of the transfer." He spent 18 months with me and passed something on to me that's the greatest gift I've ever received. But he modeled something that wasn't manufactured. He did not create it. It was the result of the way in which he lived. He held each thought captive, and you saw it when he literally stopped and backed up and said, "Hey, how do you see this?" And you can hear it through his speaking. And what's amazing about it is the most patient, the most kind, and the most a person with no panic button, even to the moment where he had a heart attack, zero panic button. And I think it was annoying to some of the people around him. Like, "Hey, this is serious. You're not freaking out." It's like, no, Jesus will let me know if I need to freak out. And I think about the kind of person I want to be. And I think all my life, the people I've admired are people like Steve. And some of the things that I almost question Steve says, "Why didn't you get worked up about that? And why didn't you say something? Or why didn't you do something?" And he goes, "Jesus got this." Because he was constantly asking him how he saw that. And he was involved in the things that Jesus told him to be involved in. And he was not involved in the things that Jesus told him not to be involved in. And it was so, not steeped or rooted in a belief system. It was rooted in a person. And that person is the truth. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Steve. And thank you for watching. We'll catch you next time, Friday at 11 o'clock, right side up, in honor of Steve Staggs. Take care, everybody. Don't mess with tech.